Hello everybody, it's Timothy here. Welcome back to our split second set review series for Core Set 2019. This time I'm going to be ranking all the blue cards, including commons, uncommons, rares, and mythic rares from what I consider to be the worst of the worst all the way up to the best ones. So remember, this is only one or two sentences about each card, not a full-blown explanation. So if you'd like a little bit more in-depth explanation about any of the cards, feel free to comment below and let me know which card you want me to elaborate on. But with that being said, let's not waste any more time. Let's go and start our split-second review of the blue cards. Seriously, if limited, once you get to 10 mana, you don't really need to be cheating cards into play. This is here for some constructed purposes or commander reprints, but it's not a card that you're going to play in limited. This is a little bit odd. If it drew a card, it would actually be pretty decent, but there aren't a lot of creatures that trigger on dealing combat damage or on attacks. There are a few, so if you have things like Izreth or Infectious Horror, I could see playing this in a very aggressive deck, but overall it's not a card you're going to play in majority of your blue decks. Here's another one of those one-mana plants for constructed formats. Mistcolor can take care of a couple cards like Rise from the Grave that cheat creatures into play, but honestly, if it's not using its activated ability, it's not doing very much of anything, and it doesn't have synergy with any of the other cards in the set, so honestly, I'm saying just leave this on the sidelines. Gearsmith Prodigy is here as part of the blue-white artifact theme in the set. It's not particularly good even if you do have an artifact. I can imagine some situations where you play this on turn 1 and an artifact on turn 2 and you get in a little bit of damage, but it doesn't look like blue wants to be a very aggressive color, so I'm not sure that this is the type of card that you're looking for limited. Sure, it's playable. It's a card that exists and it fills the curve, I guess. Alright, somehow more exciting than Tolarian Scholar is Wall of Mist, which is obviously very good if you get Arcades, the mythic rare dragon that cares about defenders, but this fills a different purpose too. If you're the type of blue deck that wants to attack in the air, then you need to defend yourself on the ground, and you could certainly do worse than a 2-mana 0/5. Ether Tunnel is a definite upgrade to the Ghost card that we just saw that makes creatures unblockable. This one's permanent and gives a temporary power boost too, which is decent with some of the cards. If you have the type of creature that wants to get through but might not have its own evasion, this is the type of card you're looking to combo with it. Supreme Phantom sucks. I'm just going to come out and say that. It is the blue lord for the set. There's one in each color, but there's only a handful of spirits, maybe 2 or 3 other spirits in the entire set, and the stats itself is not particularly good. I'm not looking to first pick this card, and it's definitely not a build around like, say, the Goblin Lord is. Well, Cancel's back, and it's a perfectly serviceable card for limited. It's never super bad, but it's never fantastic either. Keep in mind there are a couple uncounterable creatures in this format, and there are a bunch of really aggressive decks in the format too, so Cancel's probably not going to be at its absolute peak here, but it never really is. So take it if you want a counterspell, otherwise leave it alone. One with the Machine is going to be a rare that completely depends on how many artifacts you have and how big they are. If you're only running 2 to 3 mana artifacts, then it's not really that much of an upgrade over Divination. But if you have a couple 4 or 5 plus mana artifacts in your deck, then I can definitely see this doing some work. It's very low on the list because it is situational, and sometimes you just won't have an artifact at all on the board, which means this does absolutely nothing for your 4 mana. Anticipate's a great card to have. I like it about the same as I like cards like Torment and Voice. Card selection is always nice and limited, and this is the type of card that can help you find a splash color or help you find your second color of land. It's also very good in the Spells Matter deck where it gets another instant or sorcery into your graveyard, but also helps you filter into other cards. Uncomfortable Chill is the type of combat trick that I tend to like. Again, it replaces itself since it draws a card, so it's good in the Spells Matters deck. And it also shrinks down all of your opponent's creatures only, so you can use this to maneuver a tough combat and hopefully swing it around if you're behind. Bone to Ash is another situational counterspell, which we'll see quite a few of in this format. It's not fantastic and not quite as versatile as Cancel, plus it costs more mana, but in a controlling deck, this is the type of counterspell you're looking for to keep things flowing while also interacting with your opponent. Psychic Corrosion is the type of card that definitely intrigues me. It can be used as a win condition all on its own, but it requires you to be a very controlling deck or have a ton of card draw in your deck. If you can wall up or play a bunch of dorky blockers and use a bunch of removal spells, then Psychic Corrosion can mill your opponent out, and if you're drawing extra cards each turn, you'll be surprised how quickly this wins the game. Frilled Sea Serpent seems like an unexceptional card, but you could definitely do worse as a top-end creature. The fact that it can make itself unblockable is decent and gives it a little bit of utility, and it's not a bad blocker either. This is the type of finisher you get when you didn't open a bomb rare. Aviation Pioneer is a solid card. It makes 2 bodies for a total of 2 power and 3 toughness on board, which is fine, and always spreading out damage is good too. It does make a Thopter, which is an artifact as well, and matters quite a bit for this set, so solid addition to the blue-white artifact deck. Mirror Image is an exceptionally situational card. Normally you wouldn't see a clone at uncommon here, but you can tell the fact that it only copies your creatures can definitely attest to the downshift in rarity. If you have great creatures worth copying, then sure, Mirror Image is going to be a good card. But if you're playing a dorky deck or a deck with a bunch of blockers that doesn't have a lot of finishers, then Mirror Image might not be the card you're looking for. Keep in mind, if you don't have a creature on the board, then Mirror Image does absolutely nothing. Similar to Psychic Corrosion, we have Patient Rebuilding, which is a win condition in and of itself, and also a draw engine. The 2 cards combo together quite well, and I imagine that this is the type of card that might creep up in my estimations over time. I'll have to see it in action first and see whether control decks are viable. I imagine this is pretty poor against the aggro decks, but definitely a win condition if you can build around it. Disperse is just a great limited card. It's definitely better in tempo-based decks that are attacking things like blue-white rather than control decks, since it doesn't permanently deal with something, but the fact that it deals with any non-land permanent, even temporarily, seems like a good bet for me. Scholar of Stars is another creature that fits into our artifact-based decks. You don't necessarily have to be blue-white to make these artifact decks work, but they'll definitely pay you off a little bit better than most of the other color combinations. You ever draw a card off this, it's just fine, but it's still not bonkers even with that. And sometimes if you have to play it as a 4-mana 3/2, it's not really the best card out there. Sleep is one of the most overrated limited cards I've ever seen in my life. It will win you games and you will lose to it sometimes, so it's definitely got the power level there. But there are times where you're just using this to fog a couple turns. If you're not proactively taking advantage of your opponent's creatures being tapped, then Sleep loses a lot of its value. Essence Scatter is what I consider to be a little bit of an upgrade to Bone to Ash. Bone to Ash does cost twice as much and replaces itself, but being able to counter your opponent's pivotal 2-drop in a control deck is sometimes exactly what you need. Essence Scatter is a great counter spell, definitely main deckable, and you'll pick more than one of this if you can. Somehow, Totally Lost became one of the most iconic cards in Magic. We just saw it in Battlebond too, but it's a perfectly serviceable instant that you'll use in your tempo decks to great effect, and you can also use in your control decks too, although I think it gets a little bit worse there if you're not taking advantage of it. It's similar to Disperse in that it won't permanently deal with the problem, but it will get rid of it for at least a turn. Oh, the old switcheroo. There's nothing wrong with this card. It's definitely good with Thopters. The joke here is that you want to give your opponent a really crappy creature and take their best creature. Sometimes you're in a position where switcheroo isn't fantastic, or the creatures being swapped won't make a big difference, but this is a nice little card to have in a pool for a control deck, and you can just play it in your average blue deck and it'll usually be just fine. Metamorphic Alteration definitely makes it on the short list for some of the most interesting cards in the format. It does quite a bit. You can put it on an opponent's creature to shrink it down, or you can put it on your creature to make it big. It's basically a clone effect, but requires that there be a creature on board already for you to put it on, rather than being able to just play it out onto an empty board. So yeah, it's got flexibility going for it, but I'll have to see it in action before I see whether it's a busted first pick rare, or something that you're just happy to play in your blue decks. Windreader Sphinx is back with a downshift in rarity, which is quite nice because it's a nice little finisher for blue decks. It's not an insane bomb by any means, since it does cost 7 mana, which is a lot in these core sets, but it blocks the turn it comes down exceptionally well, and anytime any flyer attacks, whether that's yours or your opponent's, it's going to draw you a card. So often you'll be netting 1 to 2 extra cards per turn with this. Divination's a solid card. It's great in tempo decks, it's great in control decks, it's exactly what you're looking for in these long-winded games. If you're not up against an extremely aggressive deck, then Divination will be the type of card you'll slot in your deck and be pretty happy with. Snapping Drake is also back, and it's a serviceable flyer. It is a little bit weak on the toughness side, but assuming your opponent can't deal with it, it does hit in the air quite nicely. So I'm going to be honest, I'm taking points off Mystic Archaeologist just because it's a dreadfully boring card to have as a rare. It's not bad, not by any means. It's definitely going to take over a game in a board stall, but there's not really that much excitement about it. Blue's not really looking for a bear most of the time, but the activation can take over the game in a stalled board. Departed Deckhand is one of the only other spirits in the set when I was talking about the Spirit Ward. It is quite good, even though it's very vulnerable with the illusion ability that makes you sacrifice it when it becomes the target of a spell, meaning you can't just put an aura on this, otherwise you'll lose the creature. But the fact that it's basically unblockable and can throw around unblockable on your other creatures seems like a definite inclusion in most of your blue decks. Now, Master Thopterus is the type of card you're looking for the blue-white artifacts deck. You'll play this in any blue deck. It's already good enough on its own if you can make at least one or two Thopters off of it. A lot of times you won't actually want to sacrifice artifacts to draw a card, but it's a nice little ability to fall back on. It's really the triggered ability that you're looking at here. If you can get one or two extra Thopters off this card in the course of a game, it's definitely justified its spot in your deck. Surgemare or Horsefish is the blue card in this cycle of horses from the set. This one can't be blocked by green creatures, and it starts off as an 0/5 but has the Water Courser ability where it can swap power and toughness for a couple mana. It also has a loot ability whenever it deals damage, and it can threaten to attack as a 2/3 or a 4/1, making it very flexible. I think this card's fantastic, and it's going to be insane against green decks. Definitely a card I'm looking to pick highly. Dwindle is the type of removal spell you have to settle for when you're playing a blue deck. It's similar to something like Deep Freeze and Dominaria, where it makes a creature basically a non-factor in combat, and it even destroys that creature if it ever blocks, so they get basically one free block out of it. The only difference here is that it doesn't take away that creature's ability, so be careful not to put this on something with a strong activated ability. Omen Speaker is back in the core set, and Omen Speaker is a great card. It's great in control, it's great in aggro, it's great in tempo. Basically, any deck you want will play an Omen Speaker, and it's a 2-drop that doesn't lose value in the late game. Now, Skilled Animator is the type of card I get excited about. This is definitely a draft around me card, and if you can get an artifact down on turn 1 or 2 and then play Skilled Animator on turn 3, you should be able to take care of a game very quickly. The card works in multiples with different artifacts too, so be on the lookout for multiple copies, but I do expect this card to go pretty highly in the packs. Aven Windmage is a solid card for the Blue-Red Spells Matters deck, although it's just a solid flyer in general. You'll play this in your average blue deck, but it's definitely going to be at home in a deck that has a bunch of cantrips and instants and sorceries. Salvager of Secrets is exactly the type of card you're looking for to stall out a game. If you're a spells-based deck, or if you're a deck that has a bunch of removal and you're looking to play the control game, then this is exactly what you're looking to play on turn 5. It's going to block, get back a removal spell, and essentially kill another creature in a turn. Sift is a fantastic draw spell. With Divination in the set and Sift in the set, I imagine control decks are very viable here. As long as you don't get aggroed out and you have enough time to cast this card, it is fantastic. A lot of times you'll discard a land to it, which basically turns this into 3 free cards for 4 mana. Tezzeret should probably be higher up on our list, but honestly it is still one of the best blue cards in the set, no doubt about that. It pluses every turn to make a Flying Thopter, which is great for an artifact deck, or just great in general. It means your opponent can't just ignore this Planeswalker. Also, it can 0 to draw cards, and sometimes draw in 2 cards for a 0 ability is pretty insane. The -9 is basically undoable since it takes about 5 turns for you to get to that point in the first place, but the real power is in the +1 and the 0 ability, making Tezzeret a slam dunk first pick bomb. I'm not entirely sure Exclusion Mage should be higher than Tezzeret on this list, but I love cards like this, and the fact that Exclusion Mage exists in this set is fantastic. It does lose a little bit of value compared to Mana War since it can't bounce your own creatures, but this is the type of thing you're looking for a tempo deck. Creatures like this are always fantastic, and I imagine this will go in the first 2 to 3 picks of a draft. On second thought, Tezzeret should probably be a little higher than Horizon Scholar, but this card is fantastic. 6 mana for a 4/4 flyer that scries 2 when it enters the battlefield is great. We're used to Cloud Raider Sphinx and Dominaria, which is very similar to this card. 1 more mana for 1 more power, and uncommon is definitely comparable. Makes you wonder why Cloud Raider Sphinx was a common in the first place. And my vote for best blue card in the set, even though it's not an exciting one, is Gin of Wishes. If you've ever played with this card before, you know it's pretty strong. It's an air elemental on its base, which is great, and then for 4 mana, it lets you just freely cast the top card of your library. That's a lot of value on a 5 mana creature. It's a game finisher on its own, and it's extra card advantage on top of that. So, yeah, maybe Tezzeret deserves this #1 spot, but Gin of Wishes is definitely up there. And that's going to take care of all the blue cards from the set. Again, let me know if there are any cards you want a little bit more elaboration on. Feel free to comment below and I'll tell you how I really feel about the cards. But for now, remember that you can like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube down below, or you can find us on the Twitter at MTG_ManaRocks and do the Twitter thing there. At any rate, thanks for joining us again, and we have 2 more videos to go in this series, so stay tuned for the green cards and the gold/artifact/lands. Thanks for watching. My name's Timothy, and I'll see y'all next time.